On June 4, 2008, in Mesa, Arizona, Travis Alexander was killed in his home. 27 stab wounds, a slit throat from ear to ear, a gunshot to the head. The alleged killer, the love of his life. It was June 9, 2008, when friends of 30-year-old Travis Alexander broke into his suburban Arizona home. They hadn't heard from him in days, and worry was quickly turning into dread. What they found inside would not only shock them, it would send ripples across America. The master bathroom was dimly lit, the air heavy with the stench of decay. And there, inside the small glass shower, was the lifeless body of Travis Alexander. His throat had been slit from ear to ear, his body riddled with nearly 30 stab wounds, and a gunshot wound marked his temple. It was a scene so brutal, so personal, that even seasoned investigators would later call it one of the most horrific killings they had ever seen. But the horror didn't end there. Investigators soon discovered something that would turn this case into one of the most infamous true crime stories of the century. On a blood-soaked camera, hidden in a washing machine, were photographs. Time-stamped images that showed Travis and his girlfriend, Jodi Arias, on the very day he died. Pictures of intimacy, followed by pictures of violence. What unfolded next was a tale of obsession, betrayal, and lies so tangled that the world couldn't look away. The story of Jodi Arias became a media firestorm, a courtroom drama that gripped millions, and a chilling reminder of just how far love can twist into something deadly. This is the story of Jodi Arias. Travis Victor Alexander was born on July 28, 1977, in Riverside, California. On the surface, his life might have seemed ordinary, but beneath it lay a childhood marked by hardship and neglect. His parents struggled with addiction, leaving Travis and his siblings to fend for themselves in a home filled with chaos. At just 10 years old, Travis had to endure conditions no child should ever face. Dirty surroundings, little food, and parents who often disappeared for days. Eventually, his grandparents stepped in, taking Travis and his siblings under their care. They introduced him to the Mormon faith, a turning point that gave him structure, purpose, and a sense of belonging. As he grew, Travis transformed his pain into ambition. Charismatic and driven, he built a career in motivational speaking and sales, inspiring others with his story of overcoming adversity. Friends described Travis as upbeat, optimistic, and always the center of attention. He had big dreams, and he believed deeply in finding the right partner, someone who shared his values, his faith, and his vision of the future. He longed for a wife, a family, and a life built on stability, the very things his childhood had denied him. Jodi Arias, on the other hand, was born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California. She grew up in a middle-class family, the daughter of Bill and Sandy Arias. Unlike Travis, Jodi's upbringing was far more stable, though she would later claim her childhood was filled with emotional difficulties and tension with her parents. From a young age, Jodi had a passion for art, photography, and creative expression. Friends described her as attractive, charming, and often able to win people over quickly. But behind her warm smile and artistic talents, there were signs of insecurity and an intensity that could sometimes feel overwhelming. As she entered adulthood, Jodi bounced between jobs and relationships, searching for direction. She was known to adapt quickly to the men she dated, taking on their interests, their habits, even their beliefs. Stability, however, always seemed to elude her. It was in September 2006 that their two worlds collided. Travis and Jodi met at a company convention in Las Vegas, Nevada, both working for Prepaid Legal Services, a network marketing company. For Travis, it was just another professional gathering. For Jodi, it would change the course of her life. From the moment they locked eyes, there was an undeniable spark. Travis was instantly drawn to her beauty and charm, while Jodi was captivated by his charisma and confidence. Within days, they were inseparable, and before long, their relationship escalated into something far more than casual dating. But there was a complication. Travis was a devout Mormon, and his faith emphasized chastity and restraint before marriage. Jodi, who wasn't Mormon, agreed to be baptized into the church in late 2006. an act many believed was less about genuine belief and more about keeping Travis close. Their romance burned fast and hot, but it was anything but stable. To the outside world, they looked like a perfect couple. Travis, the clean-cut success story, and Jodi, the striking and supportive girlfriend. Behind closed doors, though, the relationship was far more complicated. Passion and intimacy mixed with jealousy and control. Breakups were followed by reconciliations, and each fight only seemed to bind them tighter in a toxic cycle. Travis confided in friends that Jodi was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Beautiful, yes, but also intense, possessive, and unpredictable. His friends noticed warning signs. One friend later recalled, "She wouldn't let him go, even when he wanted to move on." By 2008, the relationship had become a storm of emotions. Love, lust, anger, and obsession. Travis was trying to move forward with his life, dating other women and planning for the future he always dreamed of. But Jodi wasn't ready to let go. And soon, that unwillingness to let go would have deadly consequences. In the beginning, Jodi Arias gave Travis Alexander exactly what he thought he wanted. She was attentive, affectionate, and always available. She adapted to his world, from joining his church to molding her lifestyle around his. To Travis, it must have felt like he had found someone who admired him completely, a woman who looked at him with devotion in her eyes. But that devotion quickly turned into something darker. Friends of Travis would later recall that whenever Jodi was around, she seemed to orbit him, never letting him out of her sight. If he moved across the room, her eyes followed. If another woman so much as laughed at his jokes, Jodi's face would tighten with a look that was hard to miss. What Travis once mistook for passion began to look more like possession. Their relationship was defined by extremes. At times, it was intense, intimate, and exhilarating. Other times, it was filled with heated arguments, emotional manipulation, and sudden breakups. They would fight bitterly, only to reconcile days later, caught in a cycle that neither seemed able to escape. For Travis, this wasn't what he wanted for his future. He dreamed of marriage, children, and a wholesome life with someone who shared his values. But with Jodi, he was torn between physical attraction and the realization that she wasn't the woman he could settle down with. In private conversations with friends, he described her as the worst thing that ever happened to me. Yet he kept getting pulled back into her web. By early 2008, Travis had started seeing other women, hoping to move on. But Jodi wasn't ready to accept that the relationship was over. She clung tighter, showing up unexpectedly at his home in Mesa, Arizona, sometimes driving over 1,000 miles unannounced. Friends would later recall bizarre incidents, like Jodi sneaking into his house through the doggy door, or showing up late at night and refusing to leave. One friend described her as like a shadow you couldn't shake. The emotional storm only grew stronger when Travis began planning a summer trip to Mexico with another woman, a sign that he was serious about moving on. To Jodi, it must have felt like betrayal. She had changed her faith, her lifestyle, even her identity for this man, only to watch him give his attention to someone else. That rejection stung. And for someone like Jodi Arias, rejection wasn't just painful. It was intolerable. Her behavior escalated. She would call and text Travis constantly, sometimes dozens of times in a single day. The messages ranged from sweet declarations of love to angry, cutting accusations. Her emotions swung wildly between wanting to win him back and punishing him for pulling away. Travis felt the strain. In private journal entries and conversations with close friends, he admitted he felt trapped between desire and fear. He once confided that Jodi was a sociopath, that she manipulated his emotions, and that he didn't know how to fully break free from her hold. It was a toxic dance. One partner trying desperately to move on, the other refusing to let go. And as spring turned to summer in 2008, the stage was set for an explosive confrontation. For Travis, life was moving forward. He was excited about his upcoming trip, making new connections, and chasing his dreams. For Jodi, every step he took away from her was another wound, another rejection, another reminder that her place in his life was slipping away. And rejection, mixed with obsession, is a dangerous combination. What began as a passionate romance had now transformed into something fragile and dangerous. An emotional tug-of-war that could only end in tragedy. It was Wednesday, June 4th, 2008, in Mesa, Arizona. The summer heat was already pressing down, but inside Travis Alexander's suburban home, the day began like any other. He had work, plans, and, in just a few days, he was set to leave for an exciting trip to Mexico with a woman who wasn't Jodi Arias. That morning, Jodi was supposed to be hundreds of miles away in California. She had told friends she was planning to visit another man in Utah, making it clear, at least on the surface, that her chapter with Travis was over. But Jodi's plans were never simple, and as later evidence would show, she had quietly changed course. Instead of heading straight to Utah, she drove through the night, crossing the desert highways into Arizona. Hours behind the wheel, her phone conveniently went silent. Investigators would later discover that her cell phone was turned off for a large portion of that drive. A detail prosecutors pointed to as a deliberate attempt to cover her tracks. By the afternoon, Jodi arrived in Mesa. For Travis, it must have been unexpected. Maybe he was surprised to see her, maybe he wasn't. Their relationship had always been unpredictable, with Jodi showing up unannounced before. But this time, the reunion was different. According to time-stamped photographs later recovered from Travis's digital camera, the two spent part of the day together inside his home. Around 1:40 p.m., the pictures showed them in intimate poses, smiling, kissing, wrapped in each other's arms. To anyone else, they might have looked like a couple still very much in love. But the camera didn't just capture moments of passion. It also captured the final hours of Travis's life. The last set of photos, taken just after 5:30 p.m., showed Travis in the shower. At first, he's looking directly at the camera, water cascading over him, his expression calm but serious. The images that follow are haunting. Travis crouched in the shower, his eyes wide, his body clearly in distress. Then, a final blurry photograph, an image of blood, of chaos, of violence erupting in that bathroom. What exactly happened between those moments remains partly a mystery, but the physical evidence tells a horrifying story. At some point, Jodi attacked. Armed with a knife, she stabbed Travis repeatedly, over and over, until his body was covered in wounds. 27 stab wounds pierced his torso, back, and head. In the frenzy, she slit his throat from ear to ear, a wound so deep it nearly decapitated him. And finally, she shot him in the head with a .25 caliber gun, the bullet lodging near his skull. The brutality was staggering. This wasn't a single act of violence. It was rage, fury, obsession unleashed. The kind of overkill that spoke not just of murder, but of deep personal hatred. When it was over, Jodi didn't flee in panic. Instead, she attempted to clean the scene. She dragged Travis's body into the shower, letting the water run over him as blood pooled on the tiles. She tossed the bloody digital camera into the washing machine, perhaps hoping it would be destroyed. She even tried wiping down surfaces, though her efforts barely concealed the carnage. Then she left, calmly, coldly, driving away from the crime scene as if nothing had happened. Later that night, she continued her trip to Utah, meeting up with the man she had told friends she was visiting all along. She laughed, flirted, and acted as though nothing was wrong. For 5 days, Travis's friends grew increasingly worried. He wasn't returning calls, wasn't showing up for work, and wasn't answering his door. Finally, on June 9, 2008, they forced their way inside his home. What they found was a nightmare. Blood smeared across walls and floors, the smell of death hanging thick in the air. And in the shower, the lifeless body of their friend, mutilated beyond recognition. The crime scene told a story of violence and betrayal, but detectives didn't yet know just how strange and twisted this case would become. Because as brutal as the murder was, it was only the beginning. When Travis's body was discovered on June 9, 2008, the scene was almost too brutal to process. Blood streaked across the walls, pooling on the bathroom floor. The stench of decomposition filled the house. His friends, the ones who had gone searching for him, were devastated. And when police arrived, They immediately knew this was no ordinary homicide. The sheer violence of the attack suggested something deeply personal. Detectives quickly ruled out robbery. Nothing in the house appeared stolen. The evidence pointed toward someone who knew Travis, someone close to him. And almost immediately, one name surfaced again and again: Jodi Arias. When questioned, Travis's friends didn't hesitate to mention her. They described her as obsessive, unstable, and unwilling to let go of the relationship. One even admitted they had warned Travis about her, fearing she might hurt him. Police now had a prime suspect, but they needed evidence to prove it. That evidence came from one of the most unexpected sources: a camera. While searching the home, detectives found a digital camera tossed inside Travis's washing machine. It had gone through the wash cycle, its outer casing battered and soaked. But investigators sent it to forensic specialists, who managed to recover the memory card. What they found was chilling. The photos showed Travis and Jodi together on June 4th, the very day of his death. At around 1:40 p.m., the couple appeared intimate, posing in bed. But by late afternoon, the photos shifted. Travis was in the shower, staring directly into the camera. In the final frames, he appeared alarmed, crouched on the shower floor. Then came a blurry, accidental photo taken during the attack. An image of Travis's bleeding body and a portion of Jodi's leg and foot, clad in blood-stained pants. It was damning. The camera had captured the crime in progress, turning suspicion into undeniable proof. Detectives wasted no time in contacting Jodi. When she was first questioned, Jodi denied everything. Calm, composed, almost rehearsed, she insisted she hadn't been in Arizona at the time of the murder. She claimed she was on a road trip to Utah, visiting another man. But her alibi began to crack almost immediately. Investigators tracked her cell phone records and noticed gaps. Hours where her phone had been turned off as she traveled through Arizona. Gas receipts showed she had purchased fuel in locations that matched a route toward Travis's home. And then there was the camera. When confronted with the photographs recovered from Travis's shower, Jodi's story changed. No longer able to deny being at Travis's house, Jodi came up with a new explanation. She claimed that two masked intruders, a man and a woman, had broken into the house while she and Travis were together. According to Jodi, the intruders attacked Travis, killing him, while she managed to escape. It was a wild story, and detectives weren't buying it. If masked intruders had murdered Travis, why would they let Jodi walk away as the only witness? Why hadn't she called police? And why had she not mentioned this story sooner? The holes in her account were obvious, but Jodi stuck to it with unwavering conviction. To the detectives listening across the table, it was clear they were dealing with someone who could lie without flinching. Eventually, when the weight of the evidence became impossible to deny, Jodi admitted she had killed Travis. But this time, she spun it as self-defense. She claimed that their relationship had been abusive, that Travis had attacked her that day, and that she had fought for her life. To investigators, this was yet another manipulation. Nothing at the crime scene suggested self-defense. The sheer number of wounds, the slit throat, the gunshot, it all spoke of overkill, not survival. And Travis's friends were adamant. He was not abusive. He had, in fact, been afraid of Jodi. Still, Jodi clung to the narrative. It would become the cornerstone of her defense in court. Meanwhile, prosecutors were assembling a mountain of evidence against her. Beyond the photographs and phone records, there was physical evidence tying her to the scene. A bloody palm print on the bathroom wall contained a mixture of Travis's blood and Jodi's DNA. Strands of her hair were also found at the scene. Everywhere investigators looked, Jodi's presence was undeniable. Prosecutor Juan Martinez, who would later become famous for his fiery courtroom style, began preparing for what he knew would be a high-profile trial. His argument was simple. Jodi Arias had killed Travis Alexander in cold blood, out of jealousy and rage, because he was moving on without her. Even before the trial, the story was already making headlines. The combination of a young, attractive woman accused of brutally murdering her equally young and charismatic ex-boyfriend was irresistible to the press. It had all the elements of a true crime sensation: sex, obsession, betrayal, and violence. Reporters swarmed the case, and soon Jodi Arias became a household name. She gave interviews from jail, often speaking with a calm, almost eerie composure. In one now infamous clip, she told a reporter, "No jury is going to convict me." It was a statement that would come back to haunt her. The stage was set, the evidence was damning, and as 2013 approached, the world was preparing to watch one of the most infamous murder trials in modern history unfold live, day by day, in front of millions. By the time January 2013 arrived, the trial of Jodi Arias was already being called one of the most sensational cases in modern American history. Court TV, HLN, and networks across the country covered every detail, turning the Maricopa County courtroom into something closer to a reality show than a legal proceeding. Millions of viewers tuned in each day, glued to the testimony, dissecting every expression, every word. It wasn't just a trial anymore, it was a cultural phenomenon. Leading the charge for the state was Juan Martinez, a fiery and relentless prosecutor. His strategy was straightforward. Jodi Arias killed Travis Alexander out of jealousy and rage. He argued that the murder was premeditated, that Jodi had planned it, stalked Travis, and executed him when she realized he was moving on with his life. The evidence Martinez presented was devastating. The camera photographs, showing the couple's final moments. The bloody palm print on the bathroom wall, a mix of Travis's blood and Jodi's DNA. The phone records and gas receipts, proving she had made a deliberate detour to Arizona. And finally, the brutality of the attack itself. 27 stab wounds, a slit throat, and a gunshot to the head. This, Martinez argued, wasn't self-defense. It was cold-blooded murder. On the other side sat Jodi Arias and her defense team, led by attorneys Kirk Nurmi and Jennifer Wilmot. Their task was monumental. With so much evidence stacked against her, they focused on one strategy: portraying Jodi as a victim of domestic abuse who snapped in a moment of fear. Jodi took the stand in her own defense, an unusual and risky move in a murder trial. For 18 days, she testified, becoming one of the longest-running witnesses in Arizona's history. She described her relationship with Travis as emotionally manipulative and sexually degrading. She claimed he belittled her, controlled her, and pressured her into sexual acts that conflicted with his religious values. Her story was vivid, detailed, and at times graphic. She painted Travis as a man who lived a double life, publicly a devout Mormon, but privately a sexual manipulator. According to Jodi, the day of the killing was the moment everything exploded. She claimed Travis attacked her in a fit of rage, and in fear for her life, she fought back. But her testimony clashed with the evidence. The sheer extent of Travis's injuries didn't look like self-defense. The fog she described about her memory seemed too convenient. And most damning of all, her lies had already shifted too many times. When prosecutor Juan Martinez stood up to cross-examine Jodi, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. He was aggressive, sharp, and unrelenting, poking holes in her story piece by piece. Martinez hammered her with the photographs, with the gas receipts, with her ever-changing versions of events. He pointed out contradictions, forcing Jodi to backtrack and stumble. His questioning exposed her as manipulative, willing to twist the truth whenever it suited her. At one point, Martinez confronted her with her infamous statement, "No jury will convict me." Jodi tried to explain it away as nervous bravado, but to the jury, and to millions watching, it came off as arrogance, even smugness. The spectacle of Jodi sparring with Martinez was broadcast into homes across the nation. She remained calm, even flirtatious at times, while he raised his voice, pressing harder. The dynamic was magnetic, the kind of courtroom theater that kept viewers hooked day after day. Outside the courtroom, the trial was a media frenzy. Commentators debated endlessly. Was Jodi a cold-blooded killer or a battered woman pushed too far? Talk shows dissected her every move. Social media exploded with memes, arguments, and armchair detectives weighing in. The world wasn't just watching the trial, they were choosing sides. And the image of Jodi Arias, sitting quietly in court, sometimes doodling, sometimes testifying with tears in her eyes, became an obsession. By May 2013, the trial reached its climax. Juan Martinez delivered a passionate closing argument, reminding the jury of the overwhelming evidence. He described the murder as one of the most brutal, excessive killings he had ever seen, an act of pure rage and control. The defense countered with a plea for understanding, painting Jodi as a vulnerable woman who had endured emotional abuse. They argued she didn't plan the killing. It was a tragic, chaotic moment of survival. But as the jurors left to deliberate, the evidence seemed impossible to ignore. On May 8, 2013, after weeks of testimony and 15 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Jodi Arias was guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, some cried, others nodded with grim satisfaction. For Travis's friends and family, it was justice. For Jodi, it was the nightmare she had once said could never happen. She had been convicted by a jury she believed would never condemn her. But the story wasn't over yet. The trial would now enter the sentencing phase, where the jury had to decide. Would Jodi Arias spend the rest of her life in prison, or would she face the death penalty? The guilty verdict was read aloud in court on May 8, 2013. The words hung heavy in the air. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jodi and Arias, guilty of first-degree murder. For Travis Alexander's family, it was a moment of relief after 5 long years of anguish. His sisters wept openly, clutching each other as the weight of justice finally touched their brother's name. Friends in the gallery nodded, whispering prayers of gratitude. But for Jodi, it was the end of the confidence she had carried into the trial. Gone was the woman who once told reporters, "No jury will convict me." Instead, she sat motionless, staring down, her face pale and unreadable. Yet the story was far from over. The jury's task was now even heavier, to decide whether Jodi Arias should live out her life in prison or be sentenced to death. In the days that followed, the trial shifted from evidence to emotion. Prosecutor Juan Martinez turned to the Alexander family, giving them a voice in the courtroom. One by one, Travis's siblings stood before the jury, delivering gut-wrenching victim impact statements. His sister Samantha described how she had found her brother's body, the haunting images seared into her memory forever. His brother Stephen spoke of the void Travis's murder left in their family, how holidays felt incomplete, how laughter had been replaced with grief. The words were raw, heartbreaking, and filled with a pain that no verdict could ever erase. Then came Jodi's turn. Standing before the jury, Jodi did something few expected. She pleaded not for forgiveness, but for her life. She told the court she wanted to live so she could contribute from behind bars. She spoke about plans to start literacy programs in prison, to donate her hair to cancer patients, to make something useful of her life even behind bars. But her statement wasn't just unusual, it was strangely self-centered. Instead of expressing remorse for Travis's death, she focused on herself, her potential, and her future. Many watching saw it as tone-deaf, even manipulative. And then came the moment that stunned everyone. Jodi looked at the jury and said, "Death is the ultimate freedom, and I would prefer to have my freedom sooner rather than later." It was a chilling contradiction. In one breath, she begged for her life. In the next, she claimed she would prefer death. The words only deepened the public's fascination and confusion about who Jodi Arias really was. When the jury retreated to deliberate Jodi's fate, the tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The Alexander family braced themselves, desperate for closure, for the harshest penalty the law could deliver. But after days of deliberation, the jury came back deadlocked. Some jurors wanted the death penalty, while others couldn't bring themselves to take a life, even one guilty of such a brutal crime. Because of the deadlock, a mistrial was declared for the sentencing phase. For the Alexanders, it was like reopening a wound that had barely started to heal. They would have to endure the process all over again with a new jury. In late 2014, the case returned to court for a second penalty phase retrial. Once again, the Alexander family poured their hearts out, reliving their trauma before yet another jury. Once again, Jodi Arias stood before them, pleading for her life. And once again, the jury could not agree. After months of testimony and arguments, the second jury also deadlocked. This time 11 jurors for death, 1 for life. That lone juror's refusal sealed Jodi's fate. Under Arizona law, without a unanimous death sentence, the decision defaulted to life in prison. On April 13, 2015, Judge Sherry Stevens sentenced Jodi Arias to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, the Alexander family spoke to reporters outside the courthouse. They expressed disappointment that Jodi had escaped the death penalty, but relief that she would never walk free again. For them, justice was imperfect but final. Inside prison, Jodi Arias faded from the spotlight but not from public memory. Even today, she remains one of the most infamous women in American criminal history. Her story a mix of obsession, violence, and media spectacle. For Travis Alexander's loved ones, the trial's end was not the end of grief. His life was cut short in a way that no sentence could repair. Yet his family vowed to keep his memory alive, not defined by his death, but by the love and light he shared during his 30 years on Earth. The trial of Jodi Arias didn't just end with a sentence. It left behind a storm of questions, debates, and an enduring fascination with one of the most infamous true crime cases in American history. From the moment Travis Alexander's body was discovered in June 2008 to the final sentencing in 2015, this case consumed the media. It was splashed across TV screens, newspapers, and the internet. Millions tuned in to watch every moment, making it one of the most televised trials since O.J. Simpson. But why? Part of the obsession came from the sheer drama of the case. It had everything a tabloid could dream of. A beautiful but troubled young woman, a charismatic victim with a promising future, forbidden love, sex, betrayal, religion, jealousy, and a murder so brutal it shocked the conscience. Cable news networks aired the trial live. Commentators debated every word, every tear, every glance between Jodi and the jury. Social media exploded with theories, memes, and heated discussions. People around the world felt as though they personally knew Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. For better or worse, Jodi became a household name, not because of her accomplishments, but because of the horror she inflicted. What made the story especially chilling was how ordinary Jodi appeared on the surface. She wasn't a hardened criminal. She wasn't a career offender. She looked like someone you might meet at a coffee shop or a bookstore. That contradiction, the girl next door who became a cold-blooded killer, captivated the public. People struggled to reconcile her soft-spoken demeanor and calm courtroom presence with the sheer savagery of her crime. And then there were her lies. Jodi's constantly shifting stories, denials, claims of masked intruders, then finally self-defense, turned her into a symbol of manipulation. She seemed incapable of telling the truth, no matter the evidence stacked against her. For many, she became the embodiment of deceit. While the world debated Jodi, it was easy to forget the real tragedy: the loss of Travis Alexander. For his family, the trial was not entertainment. It was a wound that was reopened every single day. They had to sit in court and hear intimate details about their brother's personal life, see graphic photos of his body, and endure Jodi's attempts to tarnish his memory. Even after the guilty verdict, they admitted that no sentence could bring true peace. Justice was served, but the hole Travis left in their lives could never be filled. Since 2015, Jodi Arias has been serving her sentence at the Perryville prison in Goodyear, Arizona. Life behind bars has not erased her notoriety. She has attempted appeals, given occasional interviews, and even sold drawings and artwork from prison. Yet despite her attempts to remain relevant, the spotlight has dimmed. Today, she is a forgotten figure to some, remembered only when her name resurfaces in documentaries or crime specials. But for the true crime community, Jodi Arias remains a case study in obsession, manipulation, and the extremes of human jealousy. The story of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How thin is the line between love and obsession? How dangerous is it to ignore red flags in a relationship? And why does society become so captivated by cases of beautiful killers and tragic victims? For many, the case is more than just a murder story. It's a mirror reflecting our own fascination with darkness. In the end, Jodi Arias will spend the rest of her life in prison, while Travis Alexander's family carries on without him. His legacy is not the way he died, but the life he lived. His kindness, his laughter, his dreams that were stolen too soon. The Jodi Arias case will forever be remembered not only for its brutality, but for the way it captured America's attention. It became a cultural touchstone, a true crime obsession, and a reminder that evil sometimes hides in plain sight. And perhaps the most haunting truth of all is this: behind every headline, every news clip, and every viral trial moment, there are real lives torn apart, real families broken, and a pain that never fully fades.